Before we begin, since this is a BBC-owned property, I feel the need to point out that the news arm of the BBC has a continuing issue with transphobic leanings in its news coverage. You can find in a pinned comment below various videos from both myself and other YouTubers covering this issue. And while I understand that the Doctor Who creative team is not responsible for this, I will continue to point this out for as long as it remains a consistent issue. Thank you. I've been putting this one off for a long time. Hey there, folks. Yes, it's finally time for me to properly redo my ranking of the Doctors on Doctor Who. I've been putting this off for a while because basically people have been asking me pretty much since the end of Series 11, will you do it again and put Jodie Whittaker's Doctor in? And the answer that I gave and that I stuck with was that not until I'm confident where she's going to land, and that probably won't happen until the end of her run. Now, full disclosure, at time of recording, Power of the Doctor has not aired yet, so she technically has one more appearance, even though I'm going to do the list now. But I don't expect that my entire opinion of her in the part is going to change based off one episode. So the other things to keep in mind. One, this is my opinion only. And with the exception of the very last on the list, the very bottom spot, I don't think any of these are bad or poorly done in terms of the writing. They just aren't what I prefer. And since I mentioned the writing, that's the other thing to keep in mind. What this rank is meant to be is a rank of the Doctor as a character and the way that they were portrayed, not of the episodes they appeared in. In other words, it is possible for a very good Doctor to have appeared in very bad stories, or for a Doctor who I maybe don't like as much as other people who appeared in amazing stories. This is not a rank of eras as a whole, only of the Doctors themselves. Okay, that having all been established, we've got 15 of these to go. I've got 2 to add on to the last time I did it. So let us get started with number 15, The War Doctor. This is the only one that I feel like, to me, just never fully worked. Part of this is because John Hurt, as iconic as he is, and he's not bad in Day of the Doctor, but he doesn't get much to do. It's not really about him. So that doesn't really give him that much of an opportunity to shine beyond just the actor's raw charisma, which John Hurt had a very unique kind of charisma. So that definitely helps. But that's pulling a lot of weight for a character who is not granted a ton to actually do. Now, I've tried to find stuff that would get me to like him better. There's still plenty of Big Finish stuff with John Hurt that I have not listened to, but I have listened to some of it, and it didn't turn me around on the character. He's the least interesting iteration of the Doctor to me. I will still seek out more of the War Doctor because even the worst Doctor, to me, is a Doctor worth spending some time with, but I've never found anything that really clicked with him for me. So there it is. Number 14. Before I say who this is, it's worth noting that both this one and the next one are this low for very similar reasons, in that I feel like I never fully got them. There would be moments here and there would be like, ooh, that's starting to click and I think I understand you, but like for some reason I just wasn't able to properly connect. I never felt like I really just gelled with them and got on their wavelength, and oftentimes found myself going, I don't get you. I don't fully get your deal. And that's why they're down here. And the first of these two is the Fifth Doctor. Peter Davison, first of all, is a very lovely man. I've met him. He was wonderful. His Doctor especially in his time on the show, I just find difficult to connect with. Part of this is probably at least partially due to an issue that I've talked about elsewhere, which is I don't feel like he has a definitive companion. And even if you have your favorite companion of the Fifth Doctor's era, he never built that core relationship. And I'm realizing now that a big part of how I connect with the Doctor is through how their relationship with the companion works, which honestly might be part of my issue with the War Doctor as well. But he doesn't really have that. And even the Big Finish stuff that I've listened to, some of which, again, is quite good, like Spare Parts is great. He's not the strongest thing for it, at least not for me. He's not the bits of those stories that I'm connecting with the most. And the number of times that he like clicks and I'm like, oh, I get it. They are not completely absent, but they're few and far between. And like, I have people who I'm very close with who love him, and I'm really happy for them. I wish I saw it. I just kind of don't. Number 13, the 13th Doctor. With Jodie Whittaker, similarly to Peter Davison's Fifth Doctor, I just oftentimes feel like I don't get her. Like the character is not letting me in. And again, saddling her immediately with three companions really meant that I never felt there was a core relationship there. It's kind of become Yaz by default, but the show didn't do a lot to properly build them and just put them in the same room a lot of times. I never felt like I fully understood that relationship, even when they started to be more explicit about where they were going with it. The reason she's above number 5, above the Fifth Doctor, is because she does have a few more instances that I've seen where I did connect with her and I was like, ooh, like that's not just exposition, that's not just technobabble, that's just not saying the plan, that is characterization that I get. I really want there to have been more than there was, but there is more of it that I've had from her than from Davison. Now, to be fair, I've seen all of Whittaker's stuff, and I haven't seen all of Davison's. I've seen a very decent chunk of it, but there's still some I haven't seen. So maybe when I've seen all of Davison's, I'll have found more moments and he'll end up above her at a later point. But right now, at time of recording, that's where they land. And also, I should have said this at the front end, like, don't assume that you now know where everything else is because of where it was last time I did this. Things change. I didn't go back and check what the order was last time. So I'm not trying to keep it consistent. My answer to these things often changes over time. So let us move on to number 12, the Fugitive Doctor. Jo Martin's charisma, as soon as she's on screen, grabbed me and I immediately wanted more of her. We got very little of more of her. The reason I put her above Whittaker is because I did feel like I got her pretty much immediately. And I never felt like I lost that connection with what she was doing and how she was portraying the Doctor. Unfortunately, while that puts her above Whittaker simply because the percentage of her time on screen, I felt like I got her a heck of a lot better than ended up being the case with Whittaker, she is still not there very much. I have a sneaking suspicion that as she works with Big Finish and more stuff comes out there and I listen to that, she is liable to creep her way up the list from here. But right now, she's where she is largely because of a lack of material. But wow, do I want more of her. Number 11, the First Doctor. It's worth noting at this point, as you should have guessed from how I talked about Jo Martin, we're kind of out of the ones that I'm like, on. And even the ones that I was, like, I wasn't that harsh. I don't think I was anyways. But like from here on out, I like all of these. Honestly, I even like Davison and Whittaker just less. But these are all good. It's just a matter of preference. And for me, while I enjoy quite a bit the First Doctor, especially in certain stories, the way the mystery was built around him and how crotchety and grumpy he was at the start just it's lacking that warmth. Now, he did develop that warmth over time, and one could even argue it's something of an arc for the character, possibly, but he's still a little bit often detached from what's going on a little bit in a way that makes it a little bit harder for me to root for him. I'll tell you what, though, every now and then he gets something really spot on. Like that moment in, I forget which episode of the War Machines it is, but where everyone's running and he just walks towards the machines that are destroying everything. He does have his moments like that, and they are great. Again, just kind of wish there were more of them. Number 10, the Third Doctor. Again, this is pure preference because, first of all, Jon Pertwee, one of the most charismatic men who ever lived. He brings amazing energy to this part. And like, you just gravitate towards him. You just want to be around him. And he's just got that smile that lights up the room, and he's mischievous at times. The reason he's not higher than he is because his is the James Bond of doctors. His is the more action and gadget focused, and that's just not kind of what I come to Doctor Who for. I don't actually have a problem with like the Venetian Aikido that he does, but it's just not what I come to Doctor Who for. And so as a result, he ends up down here, even though like, boy, that man could command the screen. Number 9, the Eighth Doctor. And this, and also another one a little bit later, should be illustrative of what I said before about Jo Martin, where I expect some big finish to bring her up the list, because the Eighth Doctor didn't have a lot going for him. Because as far as canon, firm, fixed canon stuff, there's the movie, which he is good in, but is not good. And then there's Night of the Doctor, which is amazing, and is only about 7 minutes long.
That's ages. What if I get bored? I need a television, couple of books, any more but chess.
But then there's all the Big Finish stuff. He kind of was, in a lot of ways, Big Finish's homegrown Doctor. Yes, he had already played the part. He was a canon Doctor before Big Finish started working with him, but they got to shape him way more than any of the others. And as a result, his stories are really well tailored to him. And to have him build the relationships that he builds with the companions makes it so easy to just fall in love with him. He's suave, he's dashing, he's just got this, you can hear, and like you have to hear because you don't see him in Big Vid, you can hear him thinking all the time. Like this never stops. He's always got an eye out. Oh, he's really good. But other things are higher because I like them even more. Like this should give you an idea of how much I love Doctor Who. I'm in like this middling area of the list, and I'm talking about how much I love these. So like, yeah, I love this show, and I love most of these. Let's move on, though. Number 8. The controversial one. The 10th Doctor. David Tennant. So, okay. I've explained this before, but I will do it again. I enjoy David Tennant as the Doctor. I'm looking forward to see what is going on in the 60th anniversary when we see him again. I like a lot of his era. However, if I'm detaching him from his era and looking at just him, he's a little more human than I like the Doctor to be. I like the Doctor to be a little bit strange, a little bit alien, which is something that certain performers bring just by the presence that they have, and others make very deliberate acting choices that lean into that. Tennant is the most human in his choices, his acting choices, and the way that he responds to situations and connects with people. And that's not a flaw. It's a feature. It's just not to my preference. And narratively, it makes total sense, because at this point, he still thinks that Gallifrey's gone. He's basically adopted Earth as a new home. He's gone native a little bit. It makes total sense, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not my preference, and I like my Doctors a little more alien. He is, and honestly, is probably part of why he's as popular as he is. He is the most relatable, the most human of the Doctors, I feel. And for me, that's just lacking something that I really like otherwise. He's still real good. And again, quite charismatic in the part. Number 7, the 6th Doctor. Once more, Big Finish did a lot of work to get me to like the Sixth Doctor. And some of my favorite Big Finish stuff features the Sixth Doctor. The main thing that they did brilliantly was match him with fantastic companions, especially Evelyn Smythe. But just in general, they knew who to put him with that could temper his harsher edges that were on full and at times painful display during Colin Baker's time actually on the show. So if I were going only by the show, he'd be down towards the bottom. He'd honestly probably be beneath Davison. But I'm not only going by the show. And I know how good Colin Baker is in the part when he is not written to be unlikable. When you get a way to connect with him, he is amazing. And he still has that edge. He never loses that sense of danger, but it stops overtaking the part to the point that you can't connect, relate, or root for him all that well, which is what happened on the show. If you don't get the appeal of Colin Baker, the two Big Finish that I'm going to recommend you seek out are Jubilee and Holy Terror. Holy Terror being my personal favorite Big Finish story that I've heard so far. Seek those out, and if you are ever going to get the Sixth Doctor, those should get you there. Number 6, the 11th Doctor. The very first time I did this list and did this ranking, he was my number 1. I think there's a couple of reasons why he was higher then than he is now. I can, admittedly, to a certain extent, be what I call prisoner of the moment. The thing that is the newest feels the most special, in a way. And at the time I did this list, he was the most recent Doctor. And in addition to that, Matt Smith is my age. So while he was the Doctor, it felt like, oh, I could be the Doctor. He's the same age as me. That's not as much of a factor now because I'm older and the Doctor remains the same visual age when I go back and see those things. So that specific element of the connection sort of faded with time. And I love this, again, the sense of the weirdness. He brought back the weird, the aliens, the alienness, the not responding to things quite the way you would expect a person to do it. He brought that back that I was missing with Tennant. And I do love it. But as time has gone on, I've just grown into a greater appreciation of others over him. But I do deeply enjoy his energy. I really like to see how he can turn on a dime. Even when he gets angry, he is so compelling. He's really, really good. He's not my number 1 anymore, and honestly, he's slipped a fair bit, but never lost my love for him. Top 5, here we go. Number 5, the Second Doctor, Patrick Troughton. The thing is, as much as William Hartnell was the initial template that started everything off, most of the character aspects that I love the most about the Doctor were introduced by Troughton. The instinctive response of danger at first glance to run away. The not only willing to let his enemies see him as a buffoon and an idiot, but to lean into that so that they underestimated him and they didn't know what he was capable of. To always kind of have an eye out and have a sense of what's going on, but to not be afraid to just be silly and to be kind. I think a lot of his moments in Tomb of the Cybermen, which is a story that aspects of which have not aged well, but his performance especially, taking time to talk to Victoria about, the life that they lead in the TARDIS.
Our lives are different to anybody else's. That's the exciting thing.
It's this sweet, familial relationship and moment that he has with her. But at the same time, he can jump right back into the action at a moment. When he runs, if you see him running, you follow him. He ran away because that's what you should be doing. And he's fun and he's silly, but he knows that this is serious and he takes what he does seriously, but he is allowed to be silly. A clown even. But he's a clown who's going to save the universe. I really love that. Number 4, the Ninth Doctor. This is another one that initially I think part of what hurt my earlier assessments of the Ninth Doctor had to do with how short Christopher Eccleston was in the part. And in addition to that, I think for a while I kind of affiliated his Doctor with Series 1, which I do think has a lot of growing pains in it. But if I do what I said at the start, I try to do with this list, which is to detach the Doctor from his era and just look at him as a character. How is this character handled? Christopher Eccleston is wonderful. He brings simultaneously a sense of warmth, a longing for connection, but also that sense of damage and trauma that he would have coming immediately after the Time War. For what went on there and what at the time that his incarnation is around, what he thinks he did, he's gonna have a lot to deal with. But he's also still gonna try and do the right thing, still try and find someone that he can bring some light and joy into their life and that can maybe bring a little into his. There's a lot of layers, a lot of complexity to Eccleston's Doctor. And yes, he is bolstered somewhat by the fact that I got to meet him briefly, granted, but I really felt a connection going and hearing him talk at panels, seeing him respond to how much everyone was so excited and happy that he was there and how much everyone loved him. Is that a little bit of an outside force influencing my opinion of him in the character part? Maybe. But it upped to my enjoyment. And I love and appreciate him more now than I think I ever did. And I'm okay with that. Number 3, Tom Baker, the Fourth Doctor. Oh, iconic for a reason. And again, a bit like Matt Smith and Patrick Troughton before him, you know, bringing the weird. Just this presence, this sense about him like, something's off about that guy. Something doesn't quite land. Something's weird. This guy's weird. Why is he weird?
Hello there.
Because he's not human. He can empathize with humans. He can show sympathy. He can show anger. He can do all that stuff, but it's not going to be quite in the way that you would expect from anybody else. His joy, especially in his earlier seasons, is infectious. He just brings a lightness while, again, always treating the situations as serious, but willing to take a villain down a peg with a joke.
Well, you're a beautiful woman, probably.
The look, the presence, Tom Baker was really poured into this role. He was the exact right fit at the exact right time, and he became, for so many people and for so long, the iconic image of the Doctor for a good reason. He's amazing. I do have 2 above him, though. Number 2, the Seventh Doctor, Sylvester McCoy. He's been inching his way up the rankings for me over time. And as I get to experience more of his classic stories and also some of his Big Finish, I love this Doctor. I feel like if you were to try to sum him up in a nutshell, it would be like if Loki was the Doctor. He's always scheming. He's always planning. But like Patrick Troughton, very willing to lean into aspects of himself so that his opponents think he's an idiot. But it's also not strictly an act. Those are aspects of him. He's a little bit just like that. But as he makes you wonder if he's even something to take seriously as a threat, he has that dark streak. He has that Machiavellian plotting going on in the back of his head. He's doing something silly to distract you while he comes up with a way to completely dismantle anything and everything that you are trying to do and have ever hoped to accomplish.
Crush the lesser races, conquer the galaxy, unimaginable power, unlimited rice pudding, etc., etc.
When the Seventh Doctor wins, it is very completely, because that is how thoroughly he dismantles those who stand in his way. And yet he's also lovable. And a big part of this is his relationship with Ace. She is not his only companion, but by far his definitive companion. And that relationship does a lot for both of them as characters. And for him to have clearly, like, this is his companion, very cleanly, very clearly, that definitive relationship boosts him up a lot because, like I said, through the nature of that relationship, I understand who a doctor is all the better. And I really feel like I get Sylvester McCoy's doctor, partially thanks to that relationship. And the more time I spend with him, the more I love him. But the number one spot, for anyone who isn't new to the channel, should not actually be a surprise. So let's do that. Number one, Peter Capaldi, the 12th Doctor.
The man that stops the monsters.
I'm not going to say it's impossible for somebody to topple him from the top spot. Because I probably thought at some points, oh, no one will ever be better than Matt Smith to me. But I think of how strongly I connect with Peter Capaldi and how much he is really my platonic ideal of the Doctor in terms of willingness to be a little silly, that somewhat harsher dark edge underneath it that doesn't overwhelm the character but is always there, in terms of the focus on kindness and having him realizing how important that needs to be part of his journey. He has more of an arc than most doctors. I would argue more than any other doctor. Some other doctors do have arcs. His is really important to me. And if you want a full breakdown on that, I did a video. And part of it has to do with my looking at it through a queer lens as a gender fluid, trans femme, queer person. But his journey of being so uncertain of who he was in his first series, to thinking he knew who he was and leaning into it so hard that it was honestly a little bit cringeworthy in his second series, to then finding the balance. And not only finding the balance with a new companion so that he could settle in and really just be who he was supposed to be and be that comfortably, to the point that he is clutching so tightly when the idea comes up that he might have to regenerate again and lose this journey and lose the person he's become.
I can't keep on being somebody else.
His performance in and of itself is already so good, but that journey that doctor goes through means so much to me. I have a hard time imagining somebody coming in above him. It still might happen. But right now, before we get new doctors that people will start asking me again, when are you going to integrate Ncuti Gatwa? Like, I don't know. We haven't even seen him yet. But for right now, at this point, Capaldi's at the top, and that's the list. What do you think of it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon's what pays the bills. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear your ranking. Like, share, subscribe also help. But ultimately, I really want you to remember that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You're the council. I just run the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. All right, time to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfullah, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Oliver B., Melinda Walters, Emu Delki, Leotha Boyd, Toy Loli, Becky Sparks, Fernobulax, The Poodle, Zach, Bookworm, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperol, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, Shayla Gourlay, Brendan LaRose, and TT. Thank you for your support. If you want to hear me try and say your name while this little guy tries to chew on my earrings, well, you can check out the Patreon for the support tiers that get you a shout out. Thanks so much. You are a pain in my butt.